This is the moment people don't realize they've been waiting for, until it's already happening. Not the soft kind, not the gentle kind, the kind that feels like the universe just flipped the lights on in a room you've been walking through in the dark. Something shifts today. Not externally first, but internally. And once it does, your life stops moving the way it used to. This isn't about manifestation, astrology hype, or spiritual aesthetics. This is about timing, about pressure, about that strange feeling you can't shake, that something unresolved is finally coming due. Not as punishment, but as recalibration. Right now, momentum feels stalled for a lot of people. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because something old has been quietly draining power in the background. And the reason this moment matters is because what clears today doesn't just remove obstacles. It changes the direction your life accelerates in next. If you felt restless, uneasy, disconnected, or like something invisible is pushing you to make a decision you've been avoiding, keep watching. Because the difference between resistance and breakthrough is already unfolding in your life, whether you see it or not. Here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes the universe doesn't bring consequences. It brings corrections. And today marks the end of paying emotional, mental, and energetic bills that were never yours in the first place. A lot of people have been living under invisible weight they didn't choose. Expectations inherited from family. Identities shaped by survival instead of truth. Responsibilities accepted out of fear instead of alignment. These things don't feel optional, because they've been sitting on your nervous system for so long, they started to feel like destiny. But something changes now. This moment doesn't ask you to release anything. It removes it. It exposes where you were charged for things you never agreed to, where you carried emotional debt that belonged to other people's wounds, other people's fears, other people's limitations. And when those false charges dissolve, people don't feel emotional. They feel lighter, calmer, clearer. Not because they healed something, but because something stopped draining them. And that creates space for something even bigger to surface. The kind of imbalance most people never recognize until it's already been shaping their life for years. This new moon doesn't just highlight where your energy's been leaking. It exposes it with precision. It works like gravity, pulling your attention, focus, and emotional power back to where it actually belongs. Suddenly, you see clearly where you've been overgiving, where you've been chasing approval instead of receiving real connection, and where you stayed in situations not because they were right, but because leaving felt harder than enduring. But something lifts now. The exhaustion fades. The emotional weight loosens. And the energy you poured into the wrong places doesn't disappear. It starts coming back to you fast, like your spirit finally remembers its own name. This isn't about letting go. It's about retrieval, about reclaiming pieces of yourself that drifted into places that couldn't hold them. The version of you that believed love required self-erasure starts dissolving, and in its place stands someone steadier, clearer, and stronger. Someone who understands that connection doesn't demand depletion, and worth doesn't require burnout. Your focus turns inward in the healthiest way. Your needs matter again. Your truth feels louder. Your path feels clearer. The things that once drained you no longer get unrestricted access to your energy. And without that constant bleed, momentum rebuilds naturally. You feel fuller, more centered, more capable of directing your life forward instead of leaking yourself into the past. And as this reclamation unfolds, a new timeline quietly locks in. One where your energy finally works for you instead of against you, and where your spirit has the space to rise into the version of yourself you were always meant to meet. Most people hear the word karma and think consequences, punishment, or some cosmic scoreboard keeping track of mistakes. But that's only half the story. Karma is also the universe's record of everything you did right when no one noticed. The unseen effort, the uncelebrated integrity. The moments you chose growth when bitterness would have been easier. Honesty when lying would have protected you. Kindness when retaliation felt justified. Patience when anger made more sense. Those moments didn't vanish. They accumulated quietly, building momentum beneath the surface, waiting for the moment life decided it was time to return the energy. And that's what this phase activates. Not dramatic payback, momentum. You might feel it as sudden ease where there used to be resistance, alignment where there used to be delay, or opportunities appearing without the exhausting effort they once required. Sometimes it's external, doors opening, people showing up differently, situations resolving themselves without struggle. Sometimes it's internal, relief, peace, clarity, or a weight lifting that you didn't even realize you'd been carrying. These are the moments when the universe whispers, "You earned this." Karma doesn't reward perfection. It rewards intention. It honors consistency. It remembers every time you chose integrity over convenience, healing over avoidance, truth over temporary comfort. None of that was wasted. It was groundwork. And now that groundwork starts turning into movement, this isn't luck. It's accumulation finally breaking the surface. And here's the part no one says out loud. Karma has a soft spot for quiet strength. For the ones who healed without broadcasting it. For the ones who forgave without being asked. For the ones who kept their hearts open in situations that tried to harden them. The people who didn't announce their pain, didn't demand recognition, didn't retaliate when they were hurt, didn't quit being decent just because the world didn't always return it. Society often overlooks those people. Karma never does. It gravitates toward sincerity, depth, and emotional honesty. It moves toward the ones who choose compassion over spite, patience over anger, truth over convenience, dignity over ego. And this moment amplifies that principle in a way that feels personal. It brings a wave of spiritual justice, tailored specifically for the ones who stayed kind, without being naive, strong without being loud, resilient without being bitter. Quiet goodness isn't invisible. It's just delayed. Every small act of integrity stacks in your favor like unseen currency, waiting for the right exchange point. And that exchange point is now. If you loved right, you're about to live right. If you're still here, still listening, that means something. In a world full of noise and distraction, you stayed. And that alone says a lot about where you're headed. This energy is intense, yes, but it's generous. It's positioning you for a chapter that finally matches the effort you've been giving behind the scenes. You don't need to force anything now. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to overthink the next steps. Stay aligned with what feels true. Stay honest with what feels alive. And let life meet you halfway. Better days aren't coming someday. They're already moving toward you. Because the real debt most people carry isn't what they've done wrong to others. It's what they've done wrong to themselves. Every time you stayed quiet when your truth wanted to speak. Every time you shrank instead of stepping forward. Every time you accepted less because it felt safer than risking more. That internal self-betrayal doesn't disappear. It accumulates. It builds quiet pressure inside the psyche until something eventually demands correction. And that's what this moment activates. Not judgment, not punishment, correction. It becomes impossible to tolerate things that once felt manageable. The old identity starts feeling too tight. The excuses stop landing. The compromises start hurting instead of helping. That discomfort isn't collapse. It's alignment trying to reclaim territory. This is the point where your nervous system stops accepting survival strategies as lifestyle choices. And when you stop abandoning yourself, something strange happens. Life stops resisting you. The friction dissolves. The delays soften. The path opens. Not because you forced anything, but because you stopped fighting your own direction. And that leads directly into the most dangerous comfort zone of all. The almost life. Because most people aren't unhappy. They're almost confident, almost aligned, almost stepping into their purpose, almost telling the truth, almost choosing themselves. It's that strange middle space where nothing is fully wrong, but nothing is fully right either. Comfortable enough to tolerate, painful enough to exhaust. This moment breaks that pattern, not dramatically, decisively. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands choice. It asks whether you're done orbiting the life you want instead of entering it. Because expansion and stagnation don't look different at first. They both feel like waiting. But only one of them moves. And the energy now refuses to let you stay in between versions of yourself. There's urgency in the air, not because something bad is coming, but because something real is. Your potential isn't asleep. It's paused, waiting for permission. And this moment becomes the line between the life you imagine and the life that starts responding to you. Because once the almost ends, momentum doesn't crawl. It accelerates. Nothing speeds destiny faster than finally stepping into the version of yourself your future already recognizes. And here's where the pressure becomes unmistakable. That strange feeling that you've reached the moment before the moment. The pause before the turn. The inhale before the shift. Not in a dramatic sense, in a psychological one. The feeling that you can't keep circling the same situation, the same pattern, the same decision anymore. Not because something is forcing you, but because something in you refuses to stay undecided. The door behind you hasn't fully closed. The door ahead hasn't fully opened. But standing still suddenly feels impossible. That tension isn't chaos. It's positioning. It's the internal countdown before movement replaces hesitation. This isn't about endings. It's about beginnings you've been preparing for without realizing it. Some doors don't close to punish you. They close to align you. And what you choose now doesn't just affect the next chapter. It sets the tone for the entire trajectory ahead. Because once you stop orbiting the timeline you want and actually step into it, everything reorganizes around that decision. This is also when old internal contracts start expiring, agreements you never realized you made, silent promises formed in moments of fear, insecurity, or survival, rules you wrote for yourself when you didn't yet feel safe trusting life, settling instead of reaching, staying quiet instead of risking rejection, carrying everything alone instead of asking for support. These shadow contracts don't feel like choices. They feel like personality traits. But they aren't who you are. They're who you became to survive. And survival rules don't apply to expansion stages. This moment exposes how many limits in your life were written by past versions of you who didn't know what was possible yet. And here's the power. These contracts don't need to be broken. They expire. The moment you outgrow the identity that created them, they lose authority. You don't have to fight old patterns when you no longer belong to the version of yourself that needed them. And that's why this shift feels internal instead of dramatic. It's not rebellion. It's release. And when those outdated agreements dissolve, something else replaces them. Clarity without apology, desire without guilt, direction without hesitation, which leads into the block almost nobody admits they have. Fear of receiving, not fear of failure. Fear of having life actually work. Fear of being seen. Fear of having things go right and not knowing how to hold it. So people shrink blessings before they arrive, downplay opportunities, talk themselves out of growth, reject support, not consciously, subtly, because somewhere along the line, wanting more became associated with selfishness, greed, or unworthiness. This moment exposes that conditioning. It shows you how often you asked for less than you needed, not out of humility, but out of habit. And the energy now doesn't respond to worthiness. It responds to alignment. You don't receive because you deserve. You receive because you're finally willing. This is the shift happening beneath the surface. You stop apologizing for expansion. You stop shrinking your desires to make other people comfortable. You stop asking permission to live well. And when you allow yourself to receive without justification, life doesn't hesitate. It responds. Because abundance isn't reward, it's resonance. And the moment you stop projecting it, momentum changes direction fast. Which is why something else begins happening almost immediately. Energy starts returning to places it was once drained. People suddenly feel clearer, stronger, more focused, more emotionally regulated. Not because they rested more, meditated more, or healed more, but because they stopped bleeding power into situations, relationships, and identities that never reciprocated. There are places where energy leaks quietly, overgiving, over-explaining, overcompensating, chasing validation, staying where you're undervalued, tying your worth to other people's reactions. Those drains don't feel dramatic, they feel normal, until they stop. And when they stop, you don't feel emotional. You feel stable, grounded, solid. You stop trying so hard. You stop chasing clarity. You stop forcing outcomes. And ironically, that's when life starts moving faster. Because power returns when resistance ends. And momentum begins when alignment replaces survival. And this is where everything changes. Because this moment isn't about healing the past. It's about releasing its authority over your future. It's about stepping out of emotional autopilot and into intentional movement. It's about choosing the life that's been quietly waiting for you, instead of the one you've been tolerating. This isn't collapse energy. It's acceleration energy. It's the point where stagnation breaks, not through effort, but through decision. And once that decision lands, nothing external has to change first. Reality reorganizes around it automatically. That's the power of alignment. That's the power of timing. And that's why this moment doesn't feel dramatic. It feels undeniable. And after that undeniability comes something even quieter. Certainty. Not the loud, performative kind. The calm, grounded kind that doesn't need to convince anyone, because it finally doesn't need permission. You stop asking yourself if you're allowed to want what you want. And that internal shift changes the way you move, the way you speak, the way you choose, the way you tolerate. You don't force endings, but you stop prolonging what no longer fits. You don't chase beginnings, but you stop resisting them. The nervous system relaxes because it no longer has to brace for the same cycles repeating. You're not running anymore, you're redirecting. And that difference changes everything. This is where life begins responding differently to you. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because your signal changed. You're no longer broadcasting survival. You're broadcasting stability. You're no longer operating from depletion, uncertainty, or fear of loss. You're operating from self-trust. And self-trust is magnetic. It reorganizes timelines. It attracts opportunities that don't require self-betrayal. It aligns you with people who don't need convincing. It opens doors that don't demand exhaustion as the entry fee. Things stop feeling like uphill battles and start feeling like momentum. Not because effort disappears, but because resistance does. You're no longer dragging your future behind you. You're finally walking with it. And when that happens, progress feels less like strain and more like flow. Less like forcing and more like arriving. What's especially powerful about this phase is how subtle the transformation looks from the outside, while feeling seismic on the inside. You might still wake up in the same room, go to the same places, talk to the same people, but the internal posture is different. You're no longer bracing against life. You're meeting it. You're no longer shrinking to fit spaces. You're expanding into them. You're no longer asking, What should I do? You're asking, what's true? And truth moves faster than strategy. Truth simplifies decisions. Truth shortens timelines. Truth dissolves the need to overthink because it doesn't argue. It resonates. This is the stage where alignment replaces anxiety, not because fear vanished, but because direction finally arrived. And once direction is clear, fear loses its leverage. It no longer gets to run the room. It becomes background noise instead of the narrator. And that's the real shift. Not that your life suddenly becomes easy, but that it finally becomes honest. You stop living in reaction and start living in response. You stop negotiating with fear and start moving with truth. You stop waiting for permission and realize it was never required. What's opening now isn't just a door, it's a trajectory. A future that no longer demands you shrink, delay, perform, or survive your way forward. You're not stepping into chaos. You're stepping into coherence. And once coherence locks in, life doesn't fight you. It organizes around you. This is the chapter where your energy stops leaking, your direction stops wavering, and your spirit stops questioning whether it's allowed to want more. You're not late. You're not behind. You're not missing anything. You're exactly on time for the life that finally fits you. And from this point forward, movement isn't forced. It's natural. Because when alignment becomes your baseline, momentum becomes inevitable. God, Source, Universe, whatever name reaches you from this place, I ask for clarity where there has been confusion, peace where there has been pressure, and strength where there has been silent exhaustion. Release what no longer belongs to me, and return what I lost while trying to survive instead of live. Realign my steps with truth instead of fear, with integrity instead of habit, with courage instead of comfort. Let the doors that no longer serve my growth close without grief, and the ones meant for me open without resistance. Teach me to trust what feels right, even when it feels unfamiliar, and to walk forward without shrinking, apologizing, or doubting my worth. May my energy stabilize, my mind clear, my heart stay open, and my life finally move in the direction my soul has always recognized as home. Amen. If this message resonated, don't ignore it. That's alignment tapping you on the shoulder. Like this, subscribe, and stay here if you're ready to move into the version of yourself your future already knows. And in the comments, write, I choose alignment. Say it. Claim it. Because momentum doesn't start with motion. It starts with decision.